Good afternoon, HBCU scholars, professors, university administrators, staff, and White House Initiative on HBCUs selects staff. We are joining our session this afternoon, sponsored by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, North Star Navigation to Career Empowerment, Securing the Job You Want, featuring Paula R. Bruner. Paula Renee Bruner is a college and law graduate of Howard University who served as a licensed appellate attorney in the EEOC's Office of General Counsel for 26 years, representing the EEOC in 10 of the federal 13 federal circuit courts, as lead or amicus counsel in significant employment discrimination cases. She created legal arguments on several novel issues, including the racially discriminatory ban of dreadlocks, which has spearheaded corrective state and local legislation, and the gender discriminatory exclusion of a transgendered funeral home director whose case is now pending before the U.S. Supreme Court. Her legal successes also include the judicial acknowledgement of the severity of the racial slur monkey under the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The right of job applicants, whether disabled or not, to challenge pre-offered disability-related interview questions under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Minor Age and Teen Workers Entitlement to Protection from Sexual Harassment and Disability Discrimination in the Workplace. She has also provided salient advice to EEOC's trial attorneys, Justice Department counsel, and members of the private bar on argument strategies. As a special assistant attorney advisor to former EEOC Chair Naomi Earp, Ms. Bruner created the EEOC's National E-Race, which is eradicating racism and colorism from employment, to address traditional and contemporary race and color issues. She also was critically responsible for the revision, finalization, and issuance of the agency's first substantive guidance on race and color discrimination, a document oft-cited in judicial decisions, litigants' briefs, and scholarly publications. In December 2016, she joined the Office of Federal Operations Appellate Review Programs Unit as a writing attorney, where she resolves federal employee appeals and seeks to uphold the federal government's commitment to being a model employer in the area of anti-discrimination enforcement. In 2018, Acting Chair Victoria Lipnick appointed her to serve as the EEOC's agency representative on the White House Initiative for Historically Black Colleges and Universities, and in 2019, on the Employment Opportunities Task Force. During Ms. Bruner's legal career, she has served as a White House attorney advisor to President Clinton, the EEOC, and the conference chairman for the National Employment Lawyers Association, and was the first staff attorney to become a judicial clerk at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District Circuit. She also taught over 200 first-year law students, first at Howard University School of Law as a third-year law student, and then as the first recent graduate and youngest faculty member at the National Law Center, George Washington University. She is the godmother of 10, mentor to many, an active member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, a life member of the NAACP, sings on 2 choirs at Reed Temple AME, and the sole proprietor of Paula's Purpose, a fashion accessory business. Her mantra is, "To much who is given, much is required." And she facilitates this creed through networking, collaboration, community building, and avidly avoiding reinventing the wheel. Without further ado, I give you Paula Bruner.
Thank you, Michelle, for that lengthy introduction. I am so glad to have those of you who are participating in this session on securing the job you want. Let's start with making the first impression. One of the things that, and let's go to the next slide, Michelle, making the first impression. Resume, your professional attire, and your interview techniques are all going to leave a lasting and hopefully positive impression on your trajectory to obtaining the job that you want. Let's start with resume writing. Next slide. The purpose of a resume. Next slide. You want to sell your application because your resume is like your sales pitch. You also want that resume to highlight your experience and accomplishments. And then ultimately, you want to get the interview and get the job. Next slide. While creativity may be acceptable in certain industries, when applying for positions, tip 1, err on the side of formality and use quality paper. Paper that is white, cream, or ivory, and has a certain weight to it. Do not use Xerox paper. Also, don't use color paper. I made that mistake. Or even colored ink, now that many resumes are uploaded online. The color of the paper or the ink may impact the online software process that your prospective employer is using and make it readable and impact its readability. It may, your resume, a colored resume may stand out from the pile of applications, but it may be for all the wrong reasons. Next slide. Tip 2. Once you understand the purpose of a resume, you must structure the resume to best highlight how your skills, experience, and accomplishments make you the best candidate for the job. All of this information, as a minimum, should fit on one page. Now, I know that there's a lot of controversy about whether resumes can be more than one page. That usually comes into play once you've had significant experience. But when you are coming out of college or professional school, there's usually not as much work experience that's relevant to the job you're seeking. And you want to make sure your employer immediately sees that you're qualified, that you have the credentials, and that you have the work experience that makes you the best candidate for the job, or at least suitable for an interview. So let's not muddy it by putting a lot of extraneous or irrelevant information on the document. And this can be conducted by limiting it to one page. Less is absolutely more. And if you don't have much to write, consider increasing the font size or the white space on your page. Also, always make certain to include relevant volunteer work experience, because all experience counts. Slide 7. Now, we're looking at tip 3, and we're looking at the section of the resume, which is the contact section, which is at the top. The contact section is the first information that the hiring official or the screener reads about you. Let's look more closely at why this example supports what applicant reviewers want to see. In this particular example, you'll notice that the name is amplified and centered so that it is the focus for the reviewer. The address and contact information for the applicant are contained on one line because, again, we want everything to be reflected on one page. So the less space we use or the way we can maximize our space is to put critical information that are connected on one line, as in this case, where the address, city and state, email address, and phone number are all on one line. To separate them, you might want to use a symbol, such as a bullet or a square, to separate the contact information independently, but you want to be consistent about the symbol or bullet that you use. We also don't want to use up the space on that line by typing out the word phone and then putting a phone number, or the word email and then putting the email address, when the two bits of information are actually very obvious as to what they are. And we can avoid the redundancy. Final note, make sure you're using a professional email address. Do not use email addresses that might be okay for your peers, but not for a professional setting. The best approach is to use your first and last name and whatever handle, AOL, Verizon, Comcast, Gmail, Fastmail, whatever the handle is. Next slide. For tip 4, note that the first example in the contacts has too many lines. If you'll notice, the person is using 2 lines to communicate their contact information, when in fact they could have put it all on one line, as was indicated in the first example under tip 3. The inconsistencies in the second example are with the bullet, the use of a symbol and then a comma in separating, a semicolon in separating the contact information. You want to make sure that whatever you decide to use to separate your contact information is consistent. The third example is actually the correct example. And that, if you will note, there's a comma after the apartment name, between the apartment and the address. And then there's a symbol that is used to separate city and state from the phone number and from the email address. Using different symbols throughout this section would make the document as separators would be too busy. Also, tip 5, make sure you use active voice. You see here in this example that the person is describing the same information, but in the first paragraph, the passive voice, the focus is on the poll and how many people use the private health care in the neighborhood. You want to make sure that you have the focus in a way that it reads where the focus is on you and then the subject matter. And then you want to make sure that it reads entertainingly as well. Lead off with a verb if possible when describing your job duties and accomplishments. And when you describe a job you have completed, even though you're still using active voice, please make sure you put those duties in past tense. So for example, under active voice, you'll see that this is a project that the person has completed. And that's why they're using past tense when they say, I created and prepared, because they're no longer doing that. But if you're in a position currently and you're describing job duties you're doing right now. You want to make sure you use the present tense. Next slide. Tip 6. One of the biggest issues I've had in reviewing resumes of applicants is how general some of them are. What we must keep in mind is your resume is your sales pitch to getting the interview and hopefully the job. So you want to make your resume a living and breathing document. You want to paint a picture of yourself to the prospective employer. And to do so, you want to describe the job duties and accomplishments in quantitative and qualitative terms. In the example above, and this is from a real resume, the person actually used almost more than 10 bullets to describe their job duties. First and foremost, you don't have to overwhelm the screener or the hiring official with everything that you've accomplished and everything you've done on the job in the resume. What you want to highlight is the most important and compelling and in some cases unique accomplishments of that job and duties of that job. And then you can save the rest for the interview, which is what you're trying to obtain. Here, this person, the first column of duties is almost repetitive of the second column of duties, except the first set, it's the duties are described very generically and very generally. And in the second set, you will notice that you'll see dollar amounts, you'll see number of items, you'll see the context in which these duties were performed, as opposed to I answered phones, or I answered phones and navigated. I answered phones on behalf of 50 officers and company officers and navigated channels for them that resulted in a network of a million people or something like that. That would be quantitative, qualitative, and also more compelling than I just answered phones. Also, you definitely don't want to give more than 3 bullets per job entry, if possible, because unless your job was just that, offered so many opportunities that were unique and quantitative and qualitative that you feel it's worth presenting. But as we see here, if you had seen this resume in its actual state, it went 4 pages and it was just a long list of bullets that can very easily turn off the reviewer and the potential employer. Next slide. Always make sure that you highlight your transferable skills. And if you have obtained these skills in more than one job opportunity, you only need to say it once for the reviewer to know, okay, this person knows how to do X. So even if you are doing, repeating certain job duties under more than one employment opportunity, you want to just highlight what's unique and relevant that you didn't already mention under another job opportunity under each one. So you're building this platform of in your sales pitch of I can actually do all of these different things, and these are the jobs at which I obtained that experience. If you look at this particular slide, you'll notice that it's a list of different types of transferable skills. Try to tie those experiences that you had to these types of transferable skills and identifying and highlighting on your resume what you have accomplished. This helps the HR professionals and hiring officials to readily identify your suitability for the position. Also, consider using the job announcement or the position description as a guide of what transferable skills this prospective employer is looking for. Next slide. Resumes, do's and don'ts. Always proofread your resume with exacting care. Now, I can tell you as a professional proofreader, I still don't always catch every mistake or typo when I'm reviewing my own work, which is why it is very helpful to have a team or at least one other person review your resume with fresh eyes. However, even in choosing who's proofreading your resume, be particular. Do not give it to someone who is sleepy. Do not give it to someone who's not engaged. Do not give it to someone who doesn't like to read. And do not give it to someone who doesn't know how to spell, because they will not catch the errors that you are hoping that if you missed it, they will catch it. Ask a guidance counselor, ask a career advisor, ask a college roommate or that is willing to look at your resume and proofread it. Also, make sure, again, you use action verbs in describing your job duties and accomplishments, and try to keep your sentences short with correct punctuation. I can tell you typos do result in a resume not getting fully read. So if your typos are in your contact information, we may never get to the substance of your work experience. When we have been in an economic climate and job competition mode as the past 10 years, what you will find is that there are hundreds and thousands of people applying for one job. So the screening official may use all kind of standards to decide who actually gets a full read, let alone an interview. And I can assure you that often resumes with typos, with grammatical errors, with inconsistencies will end up in the trash can versus being read. Make sure when you're listing your accomplishments, you use metrics, number of people supervised, and dollar amounts attained. And also make sure in listing your college experience that you highlight that leadership experience as well as the volunteer experience, whether it's in arts, athletics, organizations, or government. And of course, any summer job opportunities you may have had. And then summarize your qualifications and objectives. Now, on the never side, the do not side, never omit dates and locations of your education or relevant volunteer and work experience, unless, and I'm going to add the caveat, unless you're over 40. And the reason I'm mentioning, and I mean age 40, and I'm mentioning that because in that instance, dates may become an issue because of age discrimination. So if you are, so we do still always want to mention the location of the institution where you obtain your degree if possible, because people aren't always familiar with where the institutions are. And you may want to mention the dates of when you obtain your degrees and certifications. But after age 40, you probably have so much work experience that that's not a critical part of the credentials that the employer is honed in on, but it could be used as a way of saying, of being viewed as obsolete, or your credentials being too old, and hence you being too old for the job. So consider, weigh that in the balance as you're setting out your resume. And that's directed primarily to my non-traditional students, because we do have them. Provide a list of references, but not on your resume. It just takes up unnecessary room. And keep in mind, The references will probably be solicited at the interview, if not afterwards. So if you do get the interview, make sure you take a list of your references with you. First and last names, job titles, and phone numbers and email addresses if you can have them. It makes it easier for the hiring official to do follow-ups as a part of the background check. Also, never cite your salary expectations on your resume. It's not necessary. The PD will give you, the position description will give you an idea oftentimes of what the salary range is, but let's leave that kind of discussion for the interview. You don't want to raise any concerns or impediments that prevent you from being chosen for the interview. However, be prepared for a question about salary expectations at the interview. Avoid, again, going over 2 pages. I, again, highly recommend that if this is your first job post-college, post-professional school, that you restrict your resume to 1 page. And never include excessive amounts of personal data, particularly if it's not relevant to the job position. So for example, no one needs to know where you vacation unless you did a research on your interviewer and learned that this was a favorite place of your interviewer and you want to make a connection with that person. It's not necessary to name your favorite rock bands or what kind of food you eat. Again, for the same reason, unless you know that this will make a connection to this specific interviewer. Keep in mind, a resume is not a social networking page. It is a formal document that could be your sales ticket to determining whether you get the job, whether you get the interview. Next slide. Remember, successful resumes have one thing in common. They are uniquely tailored to the opportunity you are seeking. A single resume for every job to which you apply does not equal success. We no longer have a one-shot stop resume approach. It is ensured to prevent you from being considered for the position. In this economy of downsizing, furloughs, layoffs, bankruptcies, and closures, many recent graduates are competing for employment with seasoned and experienced workers, but you still have a chance to be competitive. You just must emphasize your unique experiences and accomplishments as it relates to the job you're seeking. And you want to do it with accuracy, which means you don't want to inflate or over describe the job. You want to keep the descriptions brief. You want to make sure that the experiences and job duties are clear, that there is consistency in the layout and presentation of your information, and that you emphasize the results of the job that you perform. Next slide. Another essential component of the application process is the cover letter. A cover letter should always accompany a resume, even if you're submitting it online, unless otherwise directed by the employer. This document provides an opportunity to offer a snapshot of your personality. This would be the place where you might want to mention your interests, your social interests and personal interests, but not if it's controversial. And you can include information that may be interesting, even if it's a job, but not relevant to the job at issue. For example, one of the Supreme Court justices loved to play tennis. And when he hired a clerk, he looked to see if tennis was an interest of the clerk. Why? Because during the lunch hour, he wanted a ready partner to play tennis with. So Oftentimes, those who mention in their cover letters and in some cases on their resumes that they played tennis, they got the job or at least an interview. Here, you want to always, in the cover letter, name the position by name and job number if there's one associated, or vacancy announcement number, so that the person receiving it knows exactly what position you're applying for. Keep in mind, if it's an HR official or hiring official for a specific division, they may be receiving applications that cover more than one job. So it's important that you clarify what job you're applying for. Indicate your knowledge in the cover letter about the employer and why you are a good match. That should kind of be in the first paragraph. However, make sure it's not one where your focus is on what the job can do for you. Make sure it's more about what you can bring to the job. Also, you want to showcase skills or classes that prepared you for the job requirements. Now, if you don't have any, that's fine. We can highlight other things. But if you do, like, for example, if you were applying to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and you had taken a class in EEO, you might want to mention that in the cover letter, so that and indicate that that might be where your interest in this discipline started. You can also use the cover letter to embellish on your resume in a way that didn't fit on the resume itself. And you want to make sure that the cover letter is tailored to the employer that you are applying to. I remember receiving a cover letter that was clearly a cut and paste job, where the opening, the opening salutation, dear, was addressed to the hiring official, but the next paragraph spoke to a employer that was not my agency. The following paragraph spoke to another employer and the job skills that was related to that employer, which was completely different from what my agency does. And it was very distressing to see that this person who described themselves as attention to detail did not catch that they were referring in their cover letter to two different organizations that had nothing to do with my agency. So I'm sure you already know that person did not receive an interview. Just never discuss the financial need for the position. That is not the place. In fact, in the entire application process, whether it's your resume, your cover letter, or the interview itself, I can't imagine a scenario where that would be appropriate. Make sure you don't repeat resume points again. Like, I don't want you to use the cover letter to say the same thing that your resume has said. The resume should be standalone from the cover letter. Do not generically address the letter to the company. Find out who the hiring official is, if possible, or to whom you should be addressing or sending your cover letter and resume. That could be found in the job announcement, the vacancy announcement, or the position description. But try to avoid the to whom it may concern generic salutation, because it appears as if your cover letter is general and not specific to that employer. Do not send the cover letter without proofreading it. Again, I cannot emphasize that anything you submit to the potential employer should be proofread, whether it is an application form, your resume, your cover letter, if you're asked to provide a writing sample, all of that should be proofread and free of errors and grammatical issues and typos. Avoid using casual phrases or colloquialisms. So this would be exaggerative, but dear guys, I know many of us are accustomed to using "you guys" as a inclusive, purportedly inclusive phrase, not appropriate for a cover letter. And also first names. Until you are invited to use a potential employer's first name, it should always be Mr. last name, Miss last name. And because we don't know marriage status often of the women, it would be helpful to just use the MS period version, Ms. versus Miss or Mrs. But Mr. for the men. We don't want to be so casual that we've offended before we've gotten our feet in the door. Slide, next slide. So you've submitted your resume. You think you're the best candidate for the job. Now what? Next slide. You need to recognize that several things might occur after the resume submission. In some instances, and this is still the exception, you may actually be selected based solely on your resume. Sometimes, excuse me, when an employer needs to fill a position immediately, they may just review resumes without even conducting an interview and decide if they found a person, a candidate whose resume was so impressive, they said, okay, I've got to hire this person. You may end up just getting a phone call saying, hey, you got the job. Again, that's the exception. Or if your application is being seriously considered, you may be contacted by phone or email to schedule an interview. And you may actually be interviewed by telephone or even asked to submit a video interview or resume. In any of these instances, I implore you to quote unquote, stay woke by being prepared and understanding what professionalism covers. Next slide. First rule of thumb when job hunting is be professional. I cannot emphasize that enough. What is professionalism? A specific style of behavior in the workplace. So, what you don't want to do is go in joking and clowning. There's a difference between having a good sense of humor and being engaging and clowning. You want to also make sure, based on that you have an understanding of the values of that professional setting. It will be evidenced in our behavior and the behavior of others. You want to make sure you show respect for yourself and respect for others. You want to have, excuse me, a good solid knowledge of the forum in which you've entered and the discipline that they practice. You also want to show maturity, and you want to take a problem-solving approach, not griping about the way things should be or why aren't they this way. You can address those matters without sounding like you're having a temper tantrum. Next slide. Preparation and professionalism actually starts with your telephone skills. And so there is telephone etiquette. First impressions are made when contacting potential candidates to schedule interviews. That impression can be made during the conversation. And if that conversation has gone awry, may be reported to potential hiring officials. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you answer the phone professionally, particularly if you left a message and a telephone number to have your call returned if it was not answered. You want to speak clearly and use formal titles. You want to listen closely to what is being asked of you And you want to confirm before the conversation ends any interview details. And please make sure you say thank you. You also do not want to be chewing, eating, or drinking during the telephone conversation, particularly if it's a telephone interview. You want to make sure you're in a quiet space where there's no television, radio, phones ringing, or any kind of noise interruptions. If there are other people, since we're doing so much remotely now, in your vicinity, you want to make sure they're aware that you're about to have a professional telephone conversation or interview. And so you would appreciate it if they would avoid talking, cursing, shouting, or interrupting you and making noises in the background. And that companies are often using telephone interviews as the preliminary step in the process. Your telephone etiquette coupled with your preparation, that being your knowledge about the organization you're seeking employment with, can make the difference in whether you receive an in-person interview or even the job offer. All of these statements apply beyond telephone etiquette and apply to every networking and professional contact, even if that conversation or communication is occurring in person. To start, always use a formal greeting to address the interviewer, Mr. or Ms. X, until otherwise instructed. The interviewer, I must emphasize, is not your peer, and in fact, may be older than I. In fact, he or she can end up being your champion or your detractor, depending on that first contact. And please know, overfamiliarity can impact his or her view of you as a potential candidate and your ability to exercise good judgment. I want to just take a note here where I had recommended someone for a job where I had a very positive reputation. And the person basically had the job in hand until their final statement during the "do you have any questions" phrased. And the person asked a very personal question of the interviewer based on something he read that was negative about the interviewer online. And the interviewer ultimately viewed that question as an exercise of poor judgment, which ultimately resulted in the person not getting a job. We must be careful not to overstep bounds, particularly with people we don't know, and more importantly, with people who could become a potential employer. Next slide. Email etiquette. Given that many applications are submitted via email, response and interview scheduling are also conducted via email. Therefore, it is important that you follow email etiquette. Email responses that are poorly written or provide other information and provides the reviewer with a better understanding of potential candidates are immediately shared and leave lasting first positive impressions. Keep in mind that the fact you've been contacted to schedule an interview, your resume indicates that your resume, which they saw, has already proven you to be a winner. And now the job is yours until you mess up. It has fulfilled its task, the resume, of getting you to the interview. So now is not the time to blow it with poor telephone or email etiquette. Remember, everyone may not share your sense of humor, and that sometimes humor doesn't translate well in writing. So avoid internet symbols like hashtags and smiley faces or SMH, LOL, Also, make sure you refer to previous emails and discussions in your responses when you are receiving an email from the prospective employer. So, for example, if you sent an email requesting information about internships, for example, and the prospective employer sends you back information regarding the internships, and gives you a deadline, provides a link, an application form, when you respond back, in addition to thanking them for having sent you that email, you want to make sure it's thank you for submitting or for providing me with the internship application. You want to make sure the response is substantive and not just simply a thank you. This is a time saver for the reviewer, and it's a professional courtesy that sets you apart from other applicants. Next slide. So, are you prepared? You've mastered the telephone etiquette, the email scheduling, the interview set for the following week. What should you be doing now? You should be getting prepared for the interview. Research the employer and the specifics about the job you are seeking. If you know the name of your interviewer, conduct research to determine whether you have anything in common, such as being from the same state, attending the same college or university, sharing similar sports interests or career trajectories. That is information that you can have in your back pocket that you can use during the interview to help the interviewer remember you from the hundreds of other persons they may have seen. You want to Google yourself to learn what your internet resume reveals. What does that mean? Some of us may not realize that there may be negative information out there that has our name, not because it is us, but because someone may have a name that is like ours. And if there's information related to them that is not positive, you want to make sure you're already on top of that and you can give a ready explanation to your potential employer. You also want to be aware that employers review your cyber footprint. So you want to know what is on your Instagram, your tweet, your Facebook, your Snapchat, what kind of pictures are out there? Are they salacious? Are they showing you in a less than favorable light? And if there's some controversial posts or profane language, you want to essentially clean up your social media outlets, even if it means having to delete your accounts before the employer finds it. You want to prepare, you want to prepare for standard interview questions and have ready responses. Google and review interview questions that may come up, and even some of the responses that other people may have given to them. However, you want to make sure just to get an idea of what may be asked and also how others have responded. But you don't want to just replicate what someone has said, particularly if it's not pertinent to you, your life experiences, your academic achievements. You want to just get an idea of how one is expected to respond to certain questions or what type of information they're seeking. At bottom, you want to be yourself and you want to sell you. Practice the interview. Focus on speaking, tone, and providing clear and concise responses. What messages are you sending with your tone, your body language, and your appearance? Again, don't use internet slang or colloquialisms. Pre-plan your travel to the interview, especially, and I'm speaking to in-person interviews, but also pre-plan your time to getting on a remote interview, because ultimately, whatever form the interview takes, you want to be on time. If in fact it's an in-person interview, plan to arrive 30 to 45 minutes before your interview time, so that if there are any unexpected or unforeseeable delays, you will still be early or on time. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a cab and ended up with a driver that did not know how to get to my destination. Fortunately, I know DC well enough to be able to direct them. But when I initially got in a cab, I wasn't paying attention, assuming the Uber or the cab driver knew where they were going. And that added time to my destination, to the travel time. So you want to make sure you start out early, so that if in fact you are excuse me, in travel mode to get to your destination, that you arrive on time, because late arrival is not excusable, no matter why the reason. If it's remote, you want to make sure that you get, if it's a link that you have to use, that you are getting on, attempting to access it at least 10 to 15 minutes before the interview time, to make sure there are no technical glitches, to make sure that everything's operational, not only on your end, but on their end. Because if you need to call their IT to say a link isn't working that they sent you, that's going to take time and may divert from your interview time, making you appear as if you're late. Now, that might be an instance where, if you did do all this with sufficient time before your interview time, but you still arrive late, that might, and it is the employer's fault that you're late, you might be able to use that as an excuse. But to be honest, we want to avoid those kind of glitches, because we don't want to start the interview off in a negative light. Get a good night's rest before your interview. Nothing's worse than interviewing someone who's yawning every other word, appearing sleepy and unengaged. That's not the person that we would feel confident as employers hiring. You want to be attentive during the entire interview, no matter how boring the interviewer may be. You're just trying to get the job. Of course, that's also a little bit of insight as to whether that's where you want to work. But nonetheless, no yawning, no sleepy eyes. Having conducted numerous interviews, nothing is a greater turnoff than the unprepared applicant. Believe it or not, we often have applicants who have not a clue about the job for which they've applied. That's not a good thing. Do your homework. Know what the job entails, and be prepared to answer the questions. Candidates often haven't prepared for common interview questions. So I'd like to go over a few that you should keep in mind as you prepare for an interview. 1, why are you the best candidate for this position? I can't tell you how many people have no response. It doesn't matter that you don't know who your competitors are. What you want to focus on is why you think your skill sets, your credentials, your accomplishments, your academic achievements, your work experience makes you the best candidate. What qualities or traits set you apart from other candidates? If I, the interviewer, were to contact your current employer or your instructor who has given you the worst grade, what would they say about you? Be prepared to answer that question. It doesn't require you to offer a lot of negatives about yourself. But to the extent that there might be weaknesses, which all of us do have, that we can address, you can identify that in a way that either you can say, my worst, the teacher that had my worst grade, they probably would say, I'm not a morning person. And therefore, if I'm going to be required to do early morning activities, I've discovered that I need to do X, Y, and Z. That way, you've not only identified a potential weakness, but you've also identified that you have embraced that and you've resolved it. When you complete an assignment or work early, what do you do with your free time is another question you may receive from the interviewer. That's an opportunity to talk about your volunteer activities, the organizations to which you belong, and just generally how you use your free time. You can mention at times sports interests, hobbies, entrepreneurial skills, and accomplishments. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask? I cannot begin to tell you how important that invitation is. But I also will tell you it is not the time to ask questions that might lead to you not getting the job or not being considered for the job. You should always have at least one question, even if it's asking for additional information or illumination of information that the interviewer provided you about the job. Now, I'll tell you something personal about me. That is my one question that might sound peculiar, but I've embraced it and I realize it's just a part of my makeup. And it is why it is always my one question. I am not an early morning person. And many jobs have a start time range. So even when I interviewed for the attorney advisor position to President Clinton, when we got to the, do you have any questions you would like to ask? My question was, what is the latest time I can arrive in the morning? Like, what's your start time and what's the latest time I can arrive? That helps me in being true to myself about how productive I am or can be able to gauge whether I should accept a job offer, because I'm a night owl. And someone who's starting at 6 a.m., that's not going to be a good fit for me. So if that's you, you might want to ask. I will say that while my job range at the EEOC is 9:30 to 7 p.m. While I worked at the White House, I did make some adjustments to get up a little earlier, even though they were fine with my 9:30 arrival. There were so many great activities going on at the White House that you had to be there by 8:30. I adjusted my sleep time to get me up early enough that I could be there on time to participate in those activities. But trust me, the activities was driving those early arrivals, and it wasn't every day. My norm was a 9:30 arrival. Next slide. So ultimately, you want to make a positive impression, and you want to always keep in mind the first impression is always a lasting impression. So now that you've researched the job, the employer, the interviewers, you're substantively prepared. What's next? Now you want to make sure your appearance matches your mental professionalism. 55% of a person's perception of you is based on how you look. I'm sorry, that's just the facts. It's just facts. Rule of thumb. If you question an item of attire or apparel, don't wear it. I received a call from a person that I just met who sat in on an interview at a law firm where a law student showed up for an interview, male law student, in a bumblebee yellow suit. Anyone who's viewed any legal show on TV or reality show, Judge Judy on TV, or been in an actual courtroom will tell you that the color spectrum for the legal profession is usually dark, muted, and limited to black, brown, navy blue, charcoal gray, and that many of the courts have dress codes. In fact, one court I appeared before issued a dress code that even gave the width of the pinstripe that men could have on their pinstripe suits, nothing larger than the tip of a pen, as in PIN, not PEN. So you want to be aware of what people wear in the particular workforce that you're looking to join. One way of doing that would be to go to their website and see what people are, how people are attired in their professional photos or office photos. You want to dress for the job you want and not the job you have. Know that 75% of recruiters believe that how a person dresses for work affects one's job, salary, and possible promotions. And I can tell you that that's true. I was always taught to dress for success. And when Casual Friday became a common convenience, and then went from Friday to casual attire across the board, there were occasions when, because I rarely dressed casual at work, when I was brought in to different high profile sessions to represent my office because I was the only one professionally attired. And they didn't want to bring, people in that were in jeans or khakis or, just not appearing professional in their presentation. I was also able to bring more than that, as were all of my colleagues. We were all smart, we were all knowledgeable, but I often got the opportunities because I was also often appropriately attired. And those opportunities led to an increase in my professional network that I might not have otherwise had. Next slide. So you want to build your professional wardrobe. As you look at these pictures, you can see there's professional attire, and then there's also business casual, which is also appropriate in certain workplaces or maybe during certain days of the week. Are you able to spot the difference between the two? Be mindful that professional attire is actually the most susceptible for interviews, regardless of what the industry or profession is, the occupation that you're seeking. You can almost never go wrong coming to an interview, whether it's in person or remotely, professionally attired. And if in doubt, just err on the side of professional attire. Again, check out the employer's website or social media page to see how existing employees dress. Invest your money in a great suit. It's not about having the most expensive suit or even an expensive suit at all. It's really about how the suit fits, how fits your frame. It's also about looking neat and well put together. You can shop smart without spending all your money. There are stores like JCPenney's, H&M, K&G Warehouse, Target or Target, Walmart, and my favorite, consignment and thrift shops, from which you can purchase designer clothing for next to nothing. Think in advance and look for sales. Buy pieces that are versatile, timeless, and classic rather than trendy. And first and foremost, look at your current wardrobe. You might already have a blouse, a pair of pants, a blazer, a tie that you can add to upgrade something you already have. And in fact, Invest in some pearls if you're female. You can put pearls with anything, and it always takes the outfit up another level, whether it's a pantsuit, a skirt suit, or a dress. Gentlemen, note that if you have a great pair of pants, sometimes the only thing that's required is to uplift it with a nice belt. Professional wardrobe essentials for women. Regarding your blouses, your tops can be button-ups, turtlenecks, shells, or fashion blouses. But be advised, keep your colors neutral and preferably solid. Don't wear what some may call loud colors or patterns, because they can be a distraction during your interview, particularly if it doesn't fit the color palette of the interviewer. Whatever you wear, make sure it covers and fits appropriately. Not too tight, not too short, not torn, not revealing. Women, when you're working with certain sheer fabrics, make sure you review your tops and bottoms and various lighting. You do not want to show more than you intended. With your skirts, they should be a modest length, no shorter than 2 inches above the knee. The skirt should still cover your thighs when sitting, so you should practice sitting in your dress or skirt, because sometimes it may hit right at the knee when you're standing, but when you sit, it may ride up so far that it ends up becoming a distraction and revealing more skin than you intended. Your heels should be no higher than 2 inches. And I say that with the caveat that if you're not accustomed to wearing heels, you should go with the height you're comfortable with. But keep in mind, this is not the time to wear 4-inch party heels. This is just not that time. If you desire, after you get the job, to wear that, that's up to you. But during the interview, we want to keep things as low keel and avoid anything that's distracting from the interviewer listening to what you have to say versus being intrigued with your appearance. Your accessories should be modest, whether it's your necklace or your earrings, and try not to have too many rings on your hand. Rings on every finger, let's just take some of them off for the interview. Dangling earrings or loud, noisy earrings, earrings that come all the way down, to your chest. Let's save that for another event, another time, not the interview. Try to make sure your makeup is natural or muted, and avoid bright color nails. Now, I personally am a red nail person during the winter time, but I think that when you start getting into your oranges, your bright lime greens, things that bright yellows, nail polishes that can be distracting, that's what you want to avoid for your interview. Again, why are we doing this? Because the interview is our gateway to getting the job. And once you get the job, these are decisions about your appearance, whether you wear rings on every finger, whether you wear bright nail polish, that you can make down the road after you get the job with while you're exercising good judgment. Now, tattoos. On occasions, tattoos can be very distracting depending on where they are. It is advised that if you have tattoos, that if they are in visible areas, you consider either wearing a collared item that will cover it, makeup on it temporarily, just whatever you have to do to not make it the focal point. Again, you and what you have to say is what you want to be the focal point of the interview. So to the extent that a friend of mine who's a hiring official had a female applicant come in that had a tattoo of a penis going up her neck, visibly toward the face, that was a major distraction during the interview. And that could have been avoided with some makeup. But, these are things that one needs to be attentive to when interviewing. We want to make sure you don't get disqualified for something that has nothing to do with your merits, and also may impact the employer's concern as to whether you're a good fit for the organization. Next slide. Professional wardrobe essentials for men. Regarding suits, the pants should match the jacket. It usually doesn't qualify as a suit if the jacket and the pants are different materials, different colors, different fabrics. They should match. The best material in a professional setting for male suits, pure wool or a wool blend. The best colors in a professional setting, particularly for an interview, navy, charcoal gray, black, and maybe chocolate brown. No bumblebee yellow suits. Your shirt should be quality cotton or cotton blend, preferably a button down. Long sleeves are basically considered more professional than a short sleeve. But of course, if you have on a jacket, one won't notice the sleeves. But if in fact this is an environment where people typically don't wear a full suit and you're just wearing shirts, it's consider wearing a long sleeve shirt. Your accessories should be conservative. So if you have a watch, it shouldn't be all blinged out. It's, just a conservative watch. Even if you wear earrings or bracelets for the interview, consider taking them off or paring them down. So for example, if you wear hoops, men, if you're wearing hoops, you might want to wear a stud. If you're insisting on wearing an earring, wear a stud to the job interview, knowing that if you get the job, you may be able to wear what you want, but we're working on getting the job. That's the goal. Your tie should reach the top of your belt buckle. Yes, there was a time when short ties were trending, but even then, going to an interview, the tie should be long. Leather shoes are preferred over sneakers, canvas, and other type of fabrics. Be sure your socks are the same color as your shoes. And if they're not, because we know nowadays the fancy socks and all, make sure it matches the shoe or the suit so that it doesn't distract and that they blend well. Next slide. It's not about the designer or price. Ultimately, your professional attire is about looking neat and well put together. Keep in mind that even though you're looking for a job, when the employer is looking at you for the job, they're also looking at you as an extension of the organization and how you would represent and present on behalf of the organization. So you want to make sure you are well put together. And if you're unsure of what to wear, please ask. Don't ask someone who's unemployed. Ask someone who has a job, and preferably someone who works within that industry, profession, or discipline. If you still aren't sure, err on the side of caution and choose to dress professional than casual. Google is your friend. So again, another source is to check out the website of the employer. And anything you don't know, search for inspiration or explanation. Remember that when we consider each of these takeaways in totality, we decrease the likelihood of sending mixed messages to the potential employer. The interview, it's the day, and it has finally arrived. You've prepped, your attire is professional, and now you need to arrive at least 15 minutes early. Bring at least 2 copies of your resume if it's in person, and if it's not, if it's remote, have it on hand to send by email to the prospective employer if it's requested. Be able to explain why you want the position, proactively address any resume issues, have positive energy and attitude, tone, and posture. Be assertive, friendly, and confident. This is not the time for arrogance. Listen to what the employer is asking. Don't anticipate, and please don't interrupt. Answer the questions posed. Leave the interview with a positive last word, no matter how the interview went. You may walk away saying, oh, I didn't get that job. But even if that were the case because you flubbed some responses or you didn't really have a great answer in your mind to some of the questions posed, you still want to leave with a positive last word by 1, asking pertinent questions, and 2, saying thank you for the opportunity for the interview. Know that each of these business moments is, again, leaving a lasting impression, and it's also an opportunity to learn and do better. Next slide. Remember, your resume should clearly demonstrate you have the appropriate skills, the interview, and credentials. The interview is an opportunity to showcase your oral communication skills, knowledge of the job and the employer, and your personality. The interview, however, is where many jobs are lost because employers are not only looking for suitability based on your academic credentials and achievements and work experience, but they're also looking for compatibility. Next slide. So following your interview, we want to make sure, because you're still in the running, you really don't know what the competition looks like. You want to make sure you exercise etiquette after the interview. Follow your interview with a thank you note to whomever you interviewed with. So, one of the questions you can ask at your interview when asked, do you have any questions, is, how can I reach you? May I have your email address? A thank you letter that is mailed is definitely memorable. However, an emailed response is equally acceptable. Just make certain the communication has been proofread, is error-free, and succinct. Again, make sure you identify not only who you are, but the job to which you applied so that you can refresh the interviewer's mind. And make certain the content includes all of the information you see on this slide, whether it's the subject line, thanking the interviewers by name, mentioning some of the points discussed in the interview, reminding the interviewer of why you're the best candidate and letting them know, hey, I'm looking forward to hearing that I'm getting a job offer. Of course, that's not what you say, but you want to let them know you're looking forward to hearing from them. Remember again, everyone may not share your sense of humor and that it doesn't always translate well in writing. So in that thank you response, let's not go there. Let's just keep it succinct as a thank you with the pertinent reminders as you see on the screen. If you've had several email exchanges, consider referring to previous emails and discussions in that thank you response, as this is again a time saver for the reviewer. Next screen. Perseverance is the key. As you can see, this process is not easy, and the race to obtain a position is not given to the swift, but to he or she who is willing to endure and persevere. Stay the course, recognizing that everyone, and when I say everyone, including your favorite celebrities, have had to persevere despite denials and rejections, and a basic no. Happy job hunting, and please visit the EEOC's webpage and virtual booth to learn more about internships and job vacancies at the EEOC. We would love to have you, but please make sure you submit a resume that's what? Proofread, error-free, succinct, and preferably one page. Now, we will open the floor or the room up to questions and answers. Any questions you may have, and I turn it back over to Michelle to do that.
Okay, I'm checking to see if we have anything in the chat that hasn't already been addressed in your presentation.
I have one, Michelle. This is Terry. Paula,
Good.
that was amazing. I've been working for a long time, and I feel like I just want to, no, I'm not going to say I want to interview, but that was so wonderfully said, and I hear you speak all the time. That was I have my cousin in here. She's listening. She's a college student or college age. And, she's really inspired, but I just wanted to thank you for that. One question that she had, if you don't mind, is that connectivity issue.